for different because we care. Oh, yeah, for different.
My name is Na, and I'm the project leader for the project Safety in Close Relationships. And today we will be talking about what is violence. This is the first part of the 4-part series in our project. I have background in gender and development studies. I'm a social worker, and one of the reasons why this topic became of interest to me is because when I came to Norway, I realized that the perspective on violence here was very much different from what it was where I come from. So when I took my social work education here, I wrote my bachelor thesis in about corporal punishment, why minorities use corporal punishment, and how the Child Protection Services interact with these people and how they deal with such cases. So this is why I'm interested in the topic on violence, and I hope to give you a new perspective on it. I have a program here that we might or might not stick to. It depends on how engaged you are. And I have a pre-course questionnaire that I shared with you guys so that we will be able to evaluate the course after, and we'll be able to provide further courses if it's necessary. The objectives today, the first one is to increase your awareness of violence, including its forms, dynamics, and consequences. And then is to provide you with tools to recognize the signs of violence and to respond appropriately. And it's also to inform about the resources and support services for both victims and perpetrators.
Today we are talking about safety in close relationships. With that, we also want to explore the concept a little bit. It's important that we hold our opinions, we hold our experiences when it comes to violence in relationship, when it comes to abuse. But we need a reference point where we can come to agreement whether our opinions are in acquiescence with the law. So we will look at the meaning of abuse, we will look at the meaning of violence, and from the perspective of the law. So having said that, I just want to take us a little bit backwards to understand why even these laws came into force. And this is just as a result of the end of the First and the Second World War and the atrocities that women have faced all through the situation, such that we had the European Commission for Human Rights coming out with a convention that protects women, and then the elimination of all discrimination against women, the Convention for Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women, also coming into force. So these laws have been basis for countries to modify certain laws that protect the right of women and children, and wherein abuse and violence has also been taken into consideration, right? So if we want to go on, we want to understand from the law perspective what is abuse, what is violence. And if you take from the according to the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women, the definition states that it's understood as a violation of human rights and a form of discrimination against women, and shall mean all acts of gender-based violence that results in or are likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm, or suffering to women, including threats. Such acts, coercions, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. So it means that sometimes the intention that if it can be proven that you have you have an intention to cause a harm, it can be considered violent. Such an act can be considered violent. It's not only in actual tangible evidence that is only considered violence, but sometimes the act, the intent, can also be considered a violent act. So we have to understand this as well. Now, we have to understand that violence can be an act on its own, and again, abuse can also be an act on its own. But then violence can be a form of an abuse that goes on. So, for example, we have violence like the war that is happening all over around us, Ukraine, in Palestine, and all that. But when we take abuse, there can be certain acts that are violent in the abusive relationship, and it is being stated in the convention. And so they mention that it ranges from battery, kidnapping, and assaults and all that. Sometimes shouting and imposing will, coercion and all that. So these are things that are categorized as abusive and can take a form of violence. And so we have to understand that when we are talking of abuse, and we want to understand that abuse can take a form of violence, but violence is separate on its own. So, for example, you can have an intention to harm someone who lives in a house, and then you go to burn the house, and as a result, families die. That can be an arson. It's a violence on its own. But if you look at the legislature and what constitutes domestic violence, if that person is not related in any way to the person, to the family, it is not considered as domestic violence. That is a criminal act that is justified by its own penal code and punishment. So, to get this clearly, let's look at what constitutes domestic violence according to the convention. It says that according to the framework for model legislation on domestic violence by the UN, the relationship which comes within the purview of legislation on domestic violence must include wives as a living partner, right? And then we are also looking at former wives. We are looking at girlfriends, past and present. We are looking at female relatives, also sisters, cousins in that relation. All of them constitute people where if they've been abused, we can consider the act as domestic violence. So we are saying that there is a reference point, there is a legislature that states clearly that has several penal codes for different forms of violence and abuses that can be punished. Okay. Or are punishable, yes.
I want us to talk about some victims of domestic violence in Bergen. The first lady, she is called Florence Nesa, 24 years old. She was killed by her husband. She was pregnant. They had 3 children, and the 3 children were witness to what the father did to the wife. He stabbed her 240 times with different knives. Yes. It was a big case. It was all over the media. The children, it was the eldest child in Barnehagen who called legevakt, or the police. And they came to the house, and then they saw it was a very messy scene. The second lady is Henny Hayden Rasmussen. She is 19 years old. She was found dead. Her boyfriend was also found dead. And the police think that it's a murder-suicide. They think that the boyfriend killed her and killed himself. But they're still working on finding out what happened. And then the third one, Tina Milena Solberg, she was 33 years old. She had 2 kids with the husband, I think, or the Sambwa. She was killed at home by the man, and the man burnt her body in a car. And unfortunately, with her situation, it had been ongoing. There had been violence happening in the relationship. The man had a restraining order against her, and she also had an alarm. But it wasn't activated the day she was killed. So very sad story. And I think it's very important that we see the faces of the people who are victims and that we name them, because most of us think that it's something that cannot happen to us, but it's, it happens all the time. And at the latter part of 2024, Norway recorded about 23 victims of violence in the last 3 months of the year.
Because we care, oh, renting and childcare. Because childcare, oh, yeah, shit for different. Because we care, oh, yeah. Auntie give till it away, cause here